You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This episode is sponsored by Student Access. Student Access, the leader in Trio software. Student Access is an online database solution that allows Trio programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former Trio staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with Trio. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, listener, and welcome to a very special episode of Let's Talk Trio. I am your host, Juan Rivas. In today's episode, we have Maureen Hoyler and Dr. Arnold Mitchem. Both are past presidents of the Council for Opportunity in Education. Maureen and Dr. Mitchem are here to talk about the Council for Opportunity in Education, its origin story, and how it continues to champion Trio programs. So coming up in just a bit, Dr. Arnold Mitchem and Maureen Hoyler. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Rosario O'Reilly, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Jaded Electronics, TrioJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, and Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the podcast. Head on over to Patreon and search for Let's Talk Trio. Choose one of 4 patron levels. You can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way in supporting this podcast. If you own a business and would like to run an ad on our podcast, send the team a message for sponsorship packages. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our PayPal account is at Let's Talk Trio. Again, that handle is at Let's Talk Trio. Any amount is truly appreciated. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, or alumni to be on the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Dr. Arnold Mitchem and Maureen Hoyler with the Council for Opportunity in Education. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Trio Nation. My guests on the Let's Talk Trio podcast served as presidents of the Council for Opportunity in Education, also known as COE, and have long been involved in advocating for first-generation, limited income, and individuals with disabilities. Ms. Maureen Hoyler received her BA and her law degree from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ms. Hoyler has been a voice for low-income, first-generation students and individuals with disabilities. As president of COE, she oversees management of the Washington office and the fiscal affairs of the association, while also serving as the primary liaison between the association and the United States Congress, the executive branch, and all governmental agencies. She is the official representative of the association with all other post-secondary educational associations. Dr. Arnold Mitchem received his Bachelor of Arts in History and Education from the University of Southern Colorado, now known as Colorado State University, Pueblo. He has a PhD in History and Philosophy of Education from Marquette University. He began his career on the history faculty at Marquette University in Milwaukee and has named the director of the Educational Opportunity Program in 1969. Dr. Mitchem started the Council for Opportunity in Education in 1981 and served as the president until October 2013. Welcome to the podcast, Maureen Hoyler and Dr. Arnold Mitchem. Hello to you both from Colorado.
Hello.
It's great to be with you today.
Wonderful to be here.
I am excited and extremely honored to have you both on this podcast. This is a long time coming. We appreciate your time and your energy today.
Thank you.
So it has been my goal to interview you all, the excellent folks at COE. This interview is truly a milestone for the Let's Talk Trio podcast. I just wanted to, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, Mitch, you go first, okay?
Well, I grew up in Chicago and Colorado, Pueblo specifically, graduated from Pueblo Catholic High School, where I got a lot of great values. Moved on. They ended up, as Juan mentioned, in Milwaukee at Marquette University, and that's kind of my career. Came here in 1986, between 1974 and 86, when I was at Marquette. I was in Washington for at least 2 or 3 days or every month from that time until 86, until I got here, a commuter lobbyist, so to speak. But then I finally moved my family and all here in 1986. All along, I had the great support and help and genius of my colleague here, Maureen Hoyler, who started working with me as a college work study student back in the early 70s and just kept on and has done an outstanding job. So here we are, Juan.
Fantastic.
So
Ms. Hoyler, if you want, yeah.
it might be good to talk with your audience a little bit about why TRIO is organized, what organized TRIO is. So Dr. Mitchem, actually, when he took over as director of the Educational Opportunity Program at Marquette, that was totally funded by Marquette. There was no federal money in that program. Mm-hmm. But during the first year of the program, Marquette applied for and received a federal, what now would be known as a special, as a student support services grant. At the time, with Special Services for Disadvantaged Students grant. So within a couple of years after receiving that grant, the offices of there was no Department of Education at that time. There was an Office of Education in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And those offices were regional. So there was an office in Denver, there was an office in San Francisco, there was an office in Dallas, there was an office in Chicago. And the head of those offices in Chicago met with Dr. Mitchem and suggested that the people who worked in TRIO programs should form an advisory council to the Office of Education, the regional office. So that's how he got involved in organized TRIO. But Mitch, you might want to say a little bit about why being an advisory group didn't make sense to you.
It didn't make sense to me, Maureen, because we didn't have any policy authority. We didn't have any program authority. They could roll us in and roll us out, and that didn't make much sense to me and didn't have a good feeling. And so we were professionals. Other professionals, like the student financial aid officers, they had an association, so that became a kind of a lighthouse for us, so to speak. Well, at any rate, make a long story short, in '72 in the Southwest, they created SWASAP, Southwest Association of Student Assistance Programs, and then around the Great Lakes followed in forming the Educational Opportunity Association. And I was privileged to be elected president. I used that platform to work with people in all regions and states to encourage people to create 8 other regional associations. And then finally in 1977 in New Orleans, brought 21 people together, the leadership of these 10 regional associations, including the one that represents where you are now, Aspire, which was formed in Park City, Utah in 1977. Wow. And there we decided to create the National Coordinating Council of Educational Opportunity Associations, which became the instrument and the vehicle for us to raise the money, do the policy work, and eventually open an office across from the Soviet Embassy in June of '81. Now, what's important to understand is that between '77 and 1979, in our work, we achieved a policy consensus from TRIO directors and staff all across the country. What do I mean by that? We, at the time, as I said, policy authority was vested primarily with the Office of Education. We put together a national consensus as to who's eligible, what the functions of the program would be. We completely rewrote the legislation in HR 5192. My colleague here, Ms. Hoyler, was out of law school, and she translated our rhetoric into legal language so that the Congress could read it. And so then that was passed by the President of the United States in November of 1980, signed at Northern Virginia Community College, and the rest is history. Prior experience, first generation, all of that was formed and created between 1977 and 1980, critical years. Then after that became the appropriations battles. And Ms. Hoyler, why don't you talk about that?
I'm going to interrupt here. I think the students that are listening today, and for staff as well, those individuals that formed those regional associations and then the National Council, they believed that they had an obligation, that they were best placed to represent those students because they worked with those students every day. And so that they had an obligation to talk with Congress about what TRIO program should look like. Because if they didn't, people who had never worked with low-income first-generation students, never worked with Black students or Hispanic students, would be writing the laws that govern TRIO programs. So they really felt that they needed to have a voice, because if they didn't have a voice, their students wouldn't have a voice. So the point of COE is not what we do out of this Washington office. The point of what we do is that we give a voice to all the students at Colorado State and at Marquette and at Chicago State and at UCLA and at the Dallas Community College system. That's our obligation, is to make sure that the educators working in TRIO and the students served by TRIO have a voice. So that's why we exist.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in that, if I may ask a question, were your educational experience going through college or seeing just overall your experience with first generation students, did that experience motivate you to be a voice for first generation students?
What happened with me is that I was involved in a student movement at Marquette to get a program like Student Support Services started for local students, Black and Hispanic students, especially in Milwaukee. And Mitch was the first director of that program. So it was working in the program, my experiences working in the program, that said, hey, this is fun. I enjoy this. This is important work. And it's something that I think I would, when you're 20 or 21, you don't say, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. You just say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. And so tomorrow ended up to be pretty long.
Gotcha. Okay. And for Dr. Mitchem,
the other thing I really wanted and maybe Dr. Mitchem can talk more about this, is from the beginning, the educators who worked in TRIO programs believed that we would only be an effective organized group if we represented a true partnership between Black and Hispanic educators. And
it was critical.
it was absolutely critical that Hispanic educators be at the table. And because TRIO came out of the civil rights movement, it had to be deliberate that Dr. Mitchem, as the organizer and the kind of the point of contact for these regional associations, had to make that absolutely clear that this wasn't this was a partnership that grew out, that was critical to TRIO.
The Operational Rainbow Coalition.
So
it worked. It wasn't just rhetoric.
Absolutely.
Like getting that consensus, getting that law passed, where all of the Latino organizations in the United States supported COE when people tried to tear us apart using race and ethnicity as different tricks. You know the tricks, Ron. And
absolutely.
So we go for the tricks. And so we got the law and the land.
So, but before we got the law, to be honest, Mitch always, probably in 1 out of 3 speeches that he's given in his life, he always talks about show me the money, because you can judge an effectiveness. Are we serving more students? Are we expanding the reach? Are we having more impact? So when in 1970, when Mitch first started going to Washington, as he said back in 1973, 74, we were very lucky because at that time in Washington, people were really interested in the experience of students, in the experience of the programs. And so a number of members of Congress and their staff welcomed him and his colleagues. They testified before a number of subcommittees, and their staff introduced him and his colleagues to other staff. So at the time he first started going to Washington, we had an appropriation. That means the amount of money that was spent in TRIO programs was $70.3 million. Okay. So, and it had been frozen it was frozen at $70.3 million for 3 years. Okay. Through the efforts of Shirley Chisholm, who sat on the committee that writes the law, but not on the money committee, Dr. Mitchem was introduced to Lou Stokes, who was the founding member of the Black Caucus, who sat on the money committee, the appropriation subcommittee. And Mr. Stokes immediately, he had to get informed. His first question when Dr. Mitchem went in and said, hey, it's been frozen. He said, well, what's wrong with the programs? Why is it frozen? So he knew he didn't have experience of the program.
Right.
But once he got experience, every year he worked to increase that appropriation. And when he retired, many other members took up that cause. So now the TRIO appropriation is about $1.3 billion. Okay, so it moved from 70 million to 1.3 billion. And that's only because people that are listening to your podcast are organized and who fight every year to get that appropriation raised. We can't in Washington get that appropriation raised. It has to be the students and their families and the educators that work to get that appropriation raised.
So it really speaks to the importance of using community voices to continue advocating for the TRIO programs and really leveraging that community power.
That's exactly correct.
Can I make a point here?
Absolutely.
Mr. Stokes retired in 1998, but in 1995, he was still on the committee. But at that time, the Congress had changed, the House had changed hands from the Democrats to the Republicans, and Republicans were advancing what they called a contract with America. Oscar Hernandez, who is a talent search director in San Antonio, Texas, and I were invited to testify before the Appropriations Committee. And before we testified, one of the members of the Appropriations Committee stepped off the dais and came and hugged Oscar and shook my hand. His name was Henry Bonilla, who he was a graduate of that talent search program, and would tell you that today and told us then that if it hadn't been for his parents and that talent search program, he'd have never, ever gone to the University of Texas, where he got the skill, the confidence, and the training to not only become a major network newsman in New York City, but later a United States congressman representing San Antonio. And that's why he was there that morning to help us. Is still with us. He's one of us.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll take a moment to say now that without being a TRIO Upward Bound alum, I absolutely very grateful for all the work that COE does. I'm very much in the same sentiment of, had it not been for Upward Bound, I don't think I would be where I am today. Just experience all the great things that I've experienced so far. So again, thankful for all the work that you all do for advocacy of the programs and for everything that you do to join our communities together.
Hey there. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. Nosotros Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, development of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. Nosotros Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotrosedu.org.
And now, back to the podcast.
So you were talking about that sometimes those elections happen when the change of the guard happens. That can make maintaining relationships with Congress, not only Congress, but other folks as well that have a vested interest in education. Does that make forming those relationships difficult, or how does COE navigate not only those existing relationships, but continuing new relationships or forming new relationships with Congress?
Well, the point is, you want to have the relationship as early as you can. So since many members of Congress first served in their state legislatures, one of our efforts now is to make sure we have more impact at the state level. And of course, higher education is primarily responsibility of the states. And so it's really crucial that, and many times people that served in the state legislature come to Congress. So you want to have those relationships. But, you know, I can't walk into those offices. Mitch can't walk into those offices. The people that create the relationship are people who vote for the member. And so they have to introduce us. They have to say, you know, this is really important to us in Fort Collins. This is really, and get involved so that they can have that impact once an election takes place. But you have to work this year, for example, every March, it's the first activity that COE ever sponsored. We were incorporated one day. The next day, people went to the Hill, argued to get increases for TRIO. Every year, people come, alumni, students, but educators come. We visit almost every congressional office that has a TRIO program. There's some Congress districts that don't have any TRIO programs, but our goal is to have members, individuals from those districts, meet with their representative and tell them what TRIO needs and how important it is. So it's really, really key.
In what areas as advocates for college access and equity in education, in what areas has COE found success, and where are areas that are still challenging?
Well, we certainly found success in appropriations, but we're serving fewer than 7% of the students that are eligible. So, you say, we grew from 100 million, 70.3 million to $1.3 billion, but if that doesn't mean anything to the student you haven't served, it doesn't make any difference to the high school you haven't reached out to.
Right.
Until these services are available across the board, you still have a lot of work to do. And then, of course, you also have to make sure that every program has enough money, because what I always say is that the two things that are important to most TRIO students, the things that change their lives, are people, the TRIO staff, and experiences. It's the first time I came to Denver. It's the first time I went out of state. It's the first time it's not how great the math class was. It's typically what people remember is a person that affected them real, an experience that saw that that they could achieve many things that they hadn't dreamed about before. Well, giving people those experiences and hiring qualified staff, we need to do more and more of that. We have to have, you don't want somebody to have to choose to stay in TRIO or not stay in TRIO because they can't pay enough, or because we don't have enough money to travel to some rural areas. So keeping every budget at a reasonable level is really important. So those are the kinds of things that you have to keep fighting for.
Absolutely. As an advocacy organization for various educational outreach programs, partnerships are just as important. What partnerships do you form outside of Congress?
So we have a number of partnerships with corporations. Okay, a real big focus that we're building. You want every student who gets a degree, you want that degree to open up the world to them. And right now, minority students and low-income students sometimes don't get access to certain internships. They don't get access to certain leadership programs. So we really are partnering with corporations to try to make sure that they don't just, that the programs can give students experiences that make them very, very competitive in whatever market they want to be in. So that's really important. In terms of other parts of the universities, we're partnering with the Academic Advisement Association because we want to make sure that not just TRIO students, but every low-income first generation or underrepresented student gets good advising. So many times students are put into too many classes when they're freshmen, and they can't compete in both chemistry and calculus at the same time.
Right.
So that's important. We're partnering with the Student Personnel Association to make sure that first generation students are celebrated, that they're an asset to our campuses, and that they're celebrated, particularly in November of every year. So those are examples of our partnerships.
Wonderful. It seems that at any given grant cycle, whether it's new upward bound programs, new SSS programs, or any TRIO program, that these institutions are awarded this money to host the TRIO program. But some of these institutions may not feel ready or may not have staff in place to have fully implement that grant. How does COE help those new and existing programs be ready to serve their populations and serve their students?
Well, we started even before even before they get the grant. So next week, I'm going to San Diego and we do proposal writing workshops and forums, because the next TRIO cycle people will be competing for student support services grants. So they wrote it 5 years ago, but higher education's changed a lot in the last 5 years. So you really want them to be thinking in new ways. So, and then we do a lot of professional development for new directors. So that we try to be there at every stage of the game.
Absolutely. Because COE strongly advocates for college access and outreach programs, and it's definitely critical for the public to continue voicing their support for TRIO programs. But in what ways can the public also support COE and your mission and your vision?
We're particularly, Mitch, you may want to join in on this. The people that we are really focusing on now are alumni like yourself. Who better to talk about how important these programs are than people that have benefited from
But you can talk with conviction.
Absolutely.
So that's really, really important. Parents are really, really important. How hard have they worked to give their students, their children, these opportunities? And how important has TRIO been to making their dreams possible? So, and again, our corporate sector, because how are they going to have a diverse leadership if they don't have people that graduate, a diverse group of college graduates to lead these organizations, whether they're schools, whether they're corporations, whether they're hospitals, whatever area of life. If we don't graduate leaders, we won't have a diverse leadership group, and that's problematic.
Our professional class one has done a wonderful job of supporting financially this institution, but we need to go beyond that, and we have. And now we have mechanisms, we have endowments, and any American can make a contribution to our endowment. We're a 501c3 organization registered in the District of Columbia. We're a charity just like the Red Cross. And so we encourage and urge alumni and others who would like to make donations to the Council for Opportunity Education to do so. But Maureen is right. The emphasis is on corporations because that's where the money is. And they are the ones that benefit from the work of COE by providing them the human resources they need to drive their profits. So thus we think it's only fair and reasonable for them to make contributions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you all see next for COE in terms of engagement and advocacy?
Well, remember, it's a very discouraging political climate right now. Colorado contributes to that. We have 5 members of the House of Representatives that really don't believe in government.
Including one from my hometown of Pueblo.
So they would be happy in cutting TRIO funding or eliminating TRIO programs. And they've tied the Congress in knots because they've said to the speaker, unless you'd agree to what we want, we won't let you be speaker anymore.
Yeah.
So it's really tied in knots right now, and there's and it's only people in Dr. Mitchem's hometown and not in Fort Collins, but in other parts of Colorado that can say, we didn't vote for you to say that our children shouldn't get educated. Responsible for giving my child, our children, the opportunity to be educated, we're responsible to all our students and their families to talk about how really important is that government be responsive to their needs. I think that's really true. I mean,
Okay. Absolutely. Now, I also hear, I think you have all informed me before this podcast took place, that a new president-elect or a new president will be appointed to COE. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
That's right. Kim Jones, who is our executive vice president, herself a lawyer, she'll be taking over very shortly as on October 1st as president of COE. Right.
Right. Amazing. And I wanted to make this podcast really nice, short, and sweet. I appreciate all the time that you all have given so far, and really wanted the audience to get to know COE, get to know what you all do and the work that you're doing to advocate for TRIO programs. But now that we're kind of at the part of the podcast where I typically ask the guest is, what type of advice would you have for TRIO students who are listening to this podcast?
We need them. We need them to fulfill all their potential. We need them to reach for their dreams, and there's a lot of people who want them to achieve their dreams. So they shouldn't be afraid. They shouldn't, we had a few weeks ago a number of students, high school students here for a student leadership conference. We've had people, these are high school students who've come to Washington and said, hey, I'm going to run for Congress. Hey, I'm going to run for public office. People should think about that. They need to represent their communities. They need to be principals of their schools. They need to be leaders. And so they should demand that their programs give them what they need, and their colleges give them what they need. They're not second-class citizens. They're really important to the college. So they need to be supported and have voice.
Before their high school principals and other kind of leaders, they need to read, particularly the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and certain magazines. Reading is critical to develop the insights and the knowledge that is so necessary to advance yourself and to move others.
Wonderful. Great responses from you both. Thank you. So you have experience talking to a variety of TRIO professionals from all over the country. If you had every single TRIO professional in this room right now, what would you say to them?
You have to be organized. You have to be engaged in your state and regional associations. You have to be the best possible professional you can be, because people's lives are in your hands. Dr. Mitchem, I'm sure I
think that's right. We're a new professional class, and we're about other people's children, and you got to take that seriously, folks.
Dr. Mitchem, Ms. Hoyler, it was such a pleasure to have you, and a true honor to have you both on this podcast. I hope to have you again on the future, hopefully more of a one-on-one, and really get to dive into your history. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
If you could just very quickly, what is one word you would use to describe yourself? This is something I do in every single podcast episode.
Dr. Mitchem?
I'm kind.
Wonderful.
I'm optimistic. I would say optimistic.
Optimistic. Wonderful. Last question. We have a tradition on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast where we have the guests sign off from the podcast. I would love for you all to, join in this tradition and to have you both sign off.
Well, thank you for listening today. Thank you for learning more about, and there's so much in TRIO history. I hope you all dig into it.
Thank you. Coming from Colorado, it's wonderful.
Thank you all so much.
TRIO work! TRIO work!
Are you a participant, alum, or staff of a TRIO program? Do you want your program highlighted? You or your program could be featured in an upcoming episode of Let's Talk TRIO. Get a hold of us by going to our Facebook page or Instagram and send us a direct message. Search for Let's Talk TRIO. We want to get your story to the public.
Those were our guests, Maureen Hoyler and Dr. Arnold Mitchem with the Council for Opportunity and Education. Thank you both so much for being on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast and sharing the origin story of the Council for Opportunity and Education. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Rosario Riley, TrioJoblist.com, Jaded Electronics, Nosotros Education Center, and Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the Let's Talk Trio podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base patron level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor via Patreon by placing an ad on our podcast. Email us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our handle is @LetsTalkTrio. Again, that handle is @LetsTalkTrio. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk Trio podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony Ho, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk Trio podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castañeda, script supervisor, marketing manager, social media manager, and producer. Juan Rivas, executive producer and host. This episode was recorded Thursday, July 6th, 2023. Your right to vote is extremely important. Make sure you use every opportunity to exercise that right. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.